The Whispering Invitation. The forest, a cathedral of ancient oaks and whispering pines, was awash in the dappled gold of a late morning sun. Silas, his ranger uniform a familiar second skin, gestured with a calloused finger across the creased topographical map. "These here," he rumbled, his voice a low thrum against the backdrop of rustling leaves, "are your primary access routes. Well-maintained, clearly marked. Stick to them, and you'll find your way through without much fuss." He traced a confident line with his finger, indicating a wide, gravel-strewn path that snaked through a less dense section of the woods. Good for a leisurely stroll, or if you're trying to get from one side of the reserve to the other efficiently. Sarah, perched on a moss-covered boulder, watched him, her head tilted slightly. Her smile, a bright counterpoint to the deep greens and browns around them, held a glint of something uncontainable. She took the map when he offered it, her fingers brushing his briefly, a spark that wasn't static electricity. Instead of studying the meticulously drawn lines, she folded the paper with deliberate slowness, tucking it into the pocket of her faded denim jacket. Her gaze, luminous and direct, met his. "I've heard," she began, her voice a soft current in the quiet air, "there are trails not everyone gets to see. Paths that wind deeper, where the trees are older and the light falls differently." A playful challenge danced in her eyes. "Think you could show me? I just turned 18, after all. Old enough for a little adventure, wouldn't you say?" Silas's hand, which had been resting on the hilt of his utility knife, stilled. The forest, which moments before had been alive with the chirping of unseen birds and the distant rush of a stream, seemed to hold its breath. The air grew heavy, thick with the unspoken. He cleared his throat, the sound rough. Those aren't for general public access, Sarah. They're less maintained, sometimes dangerous. Easy to get lost." He tried to keep his tone level, authoritative, but a flicker of something unsettled stirred beneath his stoic facade. "Lost?" she repeated, her voice laced with an amused incredulity. "With you? A seasoned ranger who knows these woods like the back of his hand?" She leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest, yet still edged with that mischievous sparkle. "I'm not looking for a paved promenade, Silas. I'm looking for the heart of the forest. The places you only find if you know where to look, and who to ask." She let her gaze linger on his, a silent invitation hanging in the sun-dappled space between them. A bead of sweat trickled down Silas's temple, though the morning was cool. He shifted his weight, his boots crunching on fallen leaves. The rules were clear, etched into the very fabric of his uniform, into the years he'd spent patrolling these woods. But Sarah's eyes, so full of youthful daring and genuine curiosity, were a potent, unexpected force. He saw in them not recklessness, but a deep desire to truly experience something, to peel back the layers of the familiar and discover the wilder soul beneath. He glanced around, as if the ancient trees themselves might be listening, judging. The sunlight, once warm and welcoming, now seemed to dissect the air, highlighting the tension that had sprung up between them. The forest had always been predictable to him, a place of order and established routes. Now, it felt charged, alive with the possibility of something untamed, something beyond the boundaries of his well-worn map. He swallowed, the taste of pine and earth suddenly sharp on his tongue. Her request wasn't just about a path, it was about breaking away, about a shared secret in a place he had always viewed as his solitary domain. The silence stretched, a taut string vibrating between his unwavering adherence to duty and the unexpected tug of her whispered invitation. A dangerous laughter. "Those trails you've heard about aren't trails at all, Sarah," Silas said, his voice a low rumble against the chirp of unseen crickets. He gestured vaguely towards the dense undergrowth that hugged the official path. "They're game trails, animal tracks. You risk getting lost, or worse, caught in a snare. We've had a few illegal trappers in the area recently, and the terrain off-path is unforgiving. Loose rocks, sudden drops, thickets that'll tear through your clothes and skin." He adjusted the brim of his hat, the gesture of familiar punctuation to his warnings. Sarah's response was a bright, bell-like laugh that cut through the somber quiet of the woods. It wasn't dismissive, but utterly unburdened. "Oh, Silas, you make it sound like the forest is trying to eat us whole." Her eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, sparkled with an irrepressible mischief. But isn't that the point of an adventure? To see what the forest really holds, not just what it shows to everyone else? And anyway, she added, a playful glint entering her gaze, I'm with a ranger. You wouldn't let anything happen to me, would you? The question hung in the dappled sunlight, a silken thread of challenge and trust. Silas felt a strange warmth spread through him, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Her laughter, so free and uninhibited, was a dangerous thing, threatening to chip away at the carefully constructed walls of his caution. He prided himself on his adherence to regulations, his pragmatic understanding of the wilderness's indifference. Yet, her infectious enthusiasm was a potent force, stirring something dormant within him. He looked at the official path, well-trodden and predictable, then at the impenetrable tangle of green beyond. A faint, almost imperceptible deer track wove its way into the shadowed depths, promising secrets. It's not just about what I'd let happen, Sarah, he began, his voice softer than he intended. It's about understanding the risks. The forest doesn't care if you're 18 or 80, or if you're with a ranger. It just is. She took a step closer, her hand lightly touching his arm. The contact was fleeting, but it left a lingering warmth. Precisely, she exclaimed, her smile widening. And I want to be with it, not just walk beside it. Just for a little while, Silas. A quick detour. What's the worst that could happen? A few scratches? A story to tell? Her eyes held his, an unspoken plea that was more compelling than any argument. He saw not recklessness, but a genuine, vibrant curiosity. Silas found himself picturing the hidden waterfall he'd stumbled upon decades ago, a secret grotto known only to a handful of old-timers, a place he hadn't visited since his youth. The thought of sharing that lost wonder, of seeing it through her bright, excited eyes, created a peculiar ache in his chest. His resolve, usually as solid as the ancient oaks surrounding them, began to waver. Her laughter, a sweet, dangerous melody, echoed in his mind, promising a different kind of wildness. The secret agreement. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves. Silas stood by the gnarled oak, his gaze fixed on the familiar, well-worn path that snaked into the known wilderness. Sarah's words, light as a summer breeze, had landed with unexpected weight, stirring something long dormant within him. He traced a line in the dust with the toe of his boot, his brow furrowed in thought. The unspoken rules of his solitary existence, the boundaries he'd meticulously maintained, suddenly felt porous. It's not a matter of age, Sarah, he finally said, his voice a low rumble. It's a matter of understanding. The forest doesn't forgive mistakes off the beaten track. There are places, they're hidden for a reason. Sarah, leaning against a moss-covered boulder, simply watched him, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She didn't press, didn't argue, just let the quiet hang between them, a silent challenge. The afternoon sun, filtering through the dense canopy, painted dappled patterns on the forest floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. A sigh escaped Silas. He ran a hand over his silver-stubbled jaw. Just one, he conceded, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. One spot. And only if you give me your word, your absolute, solemn word, that you follow every instruction, every step, without question. This isn't a game, Sarah. This isn't a marked path. There are no rangers to find you if you stray. It's dangerous. Truly dangerous. A place for trusted eyes only. His voice had dropped, imbued with a gravity that made the hairs on Sarah's arms stand on end. Her smile widened, losing its playful edge and transforming into something earnest. You have it, Silas, she affirmed, pushing off the boulder. Her eyes, bright with anticipation, met his without a hint of fear. My solemn word. I understand. She did, in her own way. She understood the thrill of the unknown, the allure of a secret shared. The danger, for her, only heightened the appeal. Silas studied her face for a long moment, searching for any flicker of doubt or recklessness. He saw none, only a genuine, almost childlike eagerness that, against his better judgment, chipped away at his steadfast resolve. He remembered a time when he had felt that same unbridled thirst for discovery. "Good," he said, the single word carrying the weight of his decision. He pulled the worn leather map from his pocket, but instead of unfolding it, he tapped a specific, unmarked section with a calloused finger. "We'll need to set out early. Pack light, but bring enough water. No bright colors. We'll be leaving the main trail about a mile past the old logging camp. From there, it's all memory." Sarah's excitement was palpable, a vibrant energy that hummed in the air around her. She couldn't stop the small, triumphant grin that spread across her face. The thought of venturing into the truly wild, into a landscape known only to Silas, sent a shiver of pure exhilaration down her spine. The forest, which had always felt vast and open, suddenly held a new, deeper layer of mystery, a secret waiting to be unveiled. She turned, eager to prepare, her steps light and buoyant, already imagining the hidden wonders that awaited them. Into the untouched. The scent of damp earth and pine needles grew stronger as Silas pushed aside a curtain of tangled ivy, revealing a narrow, barely discernible gap in the dense undergrowth. "This isn't a marked trail, Sarah," he stated, his voice a low rumble. "It's wilder in here. Less forgiving." Sarah, however, didn't hesitate. Her eyes, bright with anticipation, scanned the shadowed opening. "Perfect," she breathed, slipping past him with an easy grace that belied the rugged terrain. The light filtering through the canopy immediately dimmed, transforming the vibrant greens of the main path into a mosaic of deep jade and emerald. Ancient trees, their trunks gnarled and thick with moss, reached skyward, their branches intertwining to form a living cathedral ceiling. "Oh, Silas," she whispered, her voice laced with genuine awe, "it's absolutely breathtaking." She ran a hand over a fern frond, dew still clinging to its delicate structure. "It feels untouched. Like we're the first people to ever step foot here." Her excitement was a palpable thing, a bright spark in the hushed quiet of the woods. She spun slowly, taking in the towering hemlocks and the carpet of wildflowers that seemed to erupt in bursts of purple and gold. Silas watched her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He'd lived in these woods his entire life, yet her unbridled wonder made him see them anew. The usual caution that weighted his every step began to lift, replaced by a forgotten lightness. "It mostly is," he admitted, his gaze sweeping over the scene. "Very few venture this far off the established paths." He found himself enjoying the way her eyes danced, the genuine joy radiating from her. It was contagious, a warmth that thawed the edges of his usual reserve. They pressed deeper, the sounds of civilization fading completely. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint, metallic tang of minerals. Silas, following a half-remembered path, felt a stirring of an old memory, a place he hadn't thought of in years. He pushed through a final thicket of hazelnut bushes, and the forest opened up into a hidden clearing. Before them, a sheer rock face, slick with perpetual moisture, birthed a narrow stream that plunged into a pristine pool below. The water, illuminated by a shaft of sunlight that pierced the canopy, shimmered with an almost otherworldly glow. A small, delicate waterfall, barely a whisper of sound, spilled into the basin, its spray creating a fine mist that caught the light, forming miniature rainbows. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "A waterfall," she exclaimed, her voice hushed with reverence. "It's incredible, Silas. You never said anything about this." He shook his head, a genuine, unburdened laugh escaping him. "I haven't been here since I was a boy," he confessed, the sound surprising even himself. The clearing was exactly as he remembered it, a pocket of magic preserved by time and isolation. The youthful joy he felt was unexpected, a pure, unadulterated happiness that bubbled up from deep within him. He watched Sarah, her face alight with wonder, and felt a connection to her, to this place, and to a part of himself he thought he'd lost. The unforeseen mist. The roar of the hidden waterfall was a symphony against the quiet hum of the forest. Sunlight, fractured by the canopy above, dappled the moss-covered rocks where the water plunged into a crystalline pool. Sarah, her face alight with wonder, extended a hand, letting the cool spray kiss her fingertips. It's even more beautiful than you described, Silas, she breathed, turning to him, her eyes sparkling. Worth every detour, every unmarked path. Silas, leaning against a slick boulder, permitted himself a small, rare smile. I told you it was special. He watched the water, a familiar calm settling over him. This was the wilderness he knew, predictable in its wildness. Just as Sarah was about to dip her entire hand into the pool, a subtle change rippled through the air. The vibrant greens and golds of the forest seemed to soften, as if viewed through a sheer curtain. A faint, almost imperceptible coolness brushed against their skin, distinct from the waterfall spray. Silas's gaze sharpened, his ranger instincts twitching. Hold on, he murmured, his voice tightening. Before Sarah could ask, the change accelerated with startling speed. A swirling, pearlescent haze began to drift from the dense foliage upstream, snaking silently towards them. Within moments, the wisp solidified into an undeniable wall of vapor. The sunlight, previously so abundant, became a diffused, ethereal glow, then dimmed further as the mist swallowed the distant trees. Whoa, Sarah whispered, her initial delight giving way to a hint of unease. That escalated quickly. The mist, thick and surprisingly heavy, rolled over the waterfall itself, muting its powerful roar to a muffled rumble. It wrapped around them, damp and cold, stealing the vivid colors from their surroundings. Suddenly, the world was reduced to shades of gray and an oppressive whiteness. Silas reached out, his hand finding only the clinging moisture in the air. He couldn't see his own fingers if he held them out. Silas? Sarah's voice, closer than he expected, held a tremor. Stay put, he ordered, his voice gruffer than intended, a reflex to the sudden disorientation. He strained his eyes, trying to pierce the opaque shroud. The familiar contours of the large boulder he'd been leaning against had vanished. The shimmering pool, a moment ago so clear, was now an indistinct, churning whiteness at their feet. The towering pines that had marked their entrance to this hidden alcove were gone, absorbed into the impenetrable curtain. He took a cautious step, his boot sinking slightly into the damp earth. We need to get our bearings. Get our bearings? Sarah repeated, a nervous laugh escaping her. Silas, I can't even see the waterfall anymore. It's like the whole forest just disappeared. Every tree looks the same, which is to say, they all look like nothing. Her voice was closer, then farther, as if she was turning in a slow circle, trying to find a point of reference that no longer existed. Which way did we even come from? Silas felt a prickle of unease, then a deeper chill that had nothing to do with the mist. His carefully chosen path, the subtle markers he'd always relied on, were utterly obliterated. The forest, usually a known entity, had become a blank canvas of white, an unnerving void where landmarks had been moments before. They were adrift in an unforeseen sea of vapor, the silence broken only by the muted echo of the waterfall and the frantic beat of his own heart. Lost and found hope. The forest, once a familiar friend, had transformed into a labyrinth. Silas, usually so sure-footed, felt the weight of every wrong turn pressing down on him. The sun, which had been a steady guide, now dappled through the canopy in disorienting patterns, each ray a mocking reminder of their lost direction. He stopped abruptly, his boot sinking slightly into a patch of soft earth. He ran a hand over his jaw, the rough stubble a minor irritation compared to the knot tightening in his stomach. Sarah, he began, his voice rougher than he intended, I don't know where we are. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. It was a confession he rarely made, a crack in the stoic facade he had carefully maintained. He expected panic, perhaps a rising tide of fear from her. Instead, a surprising calm settled over her features. Her eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, were now focused, steady, and strangely reassuring. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out, not to his arm, but finding his own calloused palm. Her fingers were surprisingly warm, a stark contrast to the sudden chill that had permeated his self-assurance. He felt a jolt, a current of unexpected comfort passing between them. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried a profound weight, a silent acknowledgement of their shared predicament and, more surprisingly, a quiet trust. "It's all right, Silas," she said, her voice a low, steady hum that cut through the growing unease. She squeezed his hand gently before releasing it, her gaze sweeping across the dense undergrowth. "We'll figure it out." Before he could respond, before the familiar urge to take control could reassert itself, she turned, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. "Look," she whispered, her voice laced with a newfound wonder. Silas followed her gaze, his eyes straining through the deepening shadows of the late afternoon. There, through a gap in the ancient oaks, he saw it, a faint, ethereal glow. It wasn't the harsh, artificial light of a distant town, nor the flickering ember of a campfire. This was softer, almost incandescent, pulsating with a gentle rhythm that seemed to beckon. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered in these woods. "What is that?" he murmured, a flicker of his innate caution returning. His ranger instinct screamed at him to be wary, to stick to the known, to avoid the mysterious. Sarah, however, seemed to have no such reservations. A spark of her usual adventurous spirit ignited in her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, a smile playing on her lips, "but it's something. And it's a direction." She turned to him, her gaze unwavering, a silent challenge in her eyes. "Let's follow it." His mind raced, weighing the unknown against the certainty of being lost. The logical choice was to hunker down, to wait for morning. But there was something in her gaze, a fearless curiosity that resonated with a part of him he thought long dormant. In that moment, the familiar dynamic between them shifted. He, the experienced guide, was now looking to her, the young adventurer, for a path forward. A new kind of hope, born of shared vulnerability and unexpected leadership, began to glimmer in the growing twilight. The forgotten cabin. The fog, thick and cloying, swallowed the familiar shapes of the forest, turning even the nearest pines into ghostly silhouettes. Silas, usually so certain of his bearings, found himself relying entirely on the pulsating, ethereal glow ahead. It bobbed and weaved through the vapor, a beacon of otherworldly luminescence. Each step was a gamble, the ground beneath their boots slick with unseen moisture. Sarah, however, seemed invigorated by the uncertainty, her eyes fixed on the light with a mixture of wonder and fierce determination. "It's almost like it wants us to follow," she murmured, her voice a low, breathy sound in the muffled quiet. She stumbled, catching herself on a moss-covered log, and then pushed forward with renewed purpose. Silas grunted, his skepticism warring with the undeniable pull of the strange phenomenon. "Or it's leading us deeper into trouble," he countered, though his own pace quickened. The air grew colder, and a faint, earthy scent, something akin to damp wood and forgotten dust, began to permeate the mist. The light, which had been a distant flicker, now resolved into a softer, more pervasive luminescence, illuminating the fog around them with a gentle, milky quality. Suddenly, the ethereal glow seemed to pool, concentrating its light not on a path, but on a structure. Through a parting in the swirling mist, a dark, angular shape materialized. It was an old cabin, its log walls warped and discolored by decades of exposure, its roof a patchwork of decaying shingles and encroaching moss. A single, small window, dark and vacant like an empty eye socket, stared out into the fog. The air around it felt ancient, heavy with the silence of long abandonment. Sarah gasped, a sound of pure awe. "A cabin? I didn't even know there was a cabin out here." She started towards it, her steps light and eager. Silas, however, stopped dead. His eyes, usually scanning for fresh tracks or broken branches, were fixed on the weathered structure. A flicker of recognition, faint yet persistent, stirred in the depths of his memory. He took a hesitant step closer, his hand reaching out as if to touch the spectral image. The cabin's silhouette, the slight tilt of its porch, the way the chimney leaned, it was all disturbingly familiar. I know this place," he said, the words emerging as a surprised whisper. He walked slowly around the perimeter, his fingers tracing the rough bark of the logs. "It's the old ranger's outpost. The one that was abandoned after the 48 fires. It's on the ancient maps, the ones they keep locked away in the archives. I thought it was just legend, a point on a forgotten survey." His brow furrowed in concentration. "No one's been out here in decades. It's supposed to be impassable, swallowed by the forest. Sarah's initial excitement morphed into a thoughtful curiosity. She peered at the dark window. So, what are the chances the light just led us to a coincidence? Her eyes, however, held a glint that suggested she already knew the answer. Silas shook his head, a rare, almost imperceptible tremor running through him. There are no coincidences in a forest this old, Sarah. Not when something like that, he gestured vaguely towards where the light had been, now just a soft, ambient glow around the cabin, is involved. This cabin, it's not just a place. It's a marker. He pushed open the creaking, unlatched door, revealing an interior steeped in shadows and the scent of decay. A new adventure, one far beyond his safe paths, had just begun. Whispers from the past. The cabin's single window, thick with grime, offered only a muted gray light. Inside, the air hung heavy and still, smelling of damp earth and forgotten wood smoke. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams that pierced the gloom, illuminating a rough-hewn table and two rickety chairs. Silas, ever the pragmatist, moved to the fireplace, checking the flue while Sarah, her curiosity piqued, began to explore. Her fingers brushed against a shelf, dislodging a cascade of grit and revealing a thick, leather-bound volume tucked beneath a pile of old kindling. "Silas, look at this," she called, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. She pulled it free, blowing a cloud of dust from its cover. A logbook, by the looks of it. Silas turned, his brow furrowed. "Careful with that. Might be fragile." He watched as she gingerly opened the book. The pages, brittle with age, were filled with neat, spidery handwriting. A faint scent of dried herbs wafted from between the leaves. Ranger Elias Thorne, assigned Sector 7, commencing June 12, 1958, Sarah read aloud, her voice hushed. "Thorne, any relation?" Silas took a step closer, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "My grandfather," he said, his voice low. He extended a hand, and Sarah, sensing the significance, passed him the book. He turned a few pages, his gaze sweeping over the entries. He was known for his meticulous notes. As Silas continued to leaf through the worn pages, Sarah leaned over his shoulder, her breath a warm whisper against his ear. "What's he writing about?" "Mostly routine patrols, wildlife sightings," Silas murmured, his finger tracing a line of faded ink. "But, wait." His expression tightened. "He's detailing the very path we've been following. The old riverbed, the twin pines, the moss-covered boulders." He looked up, his gaze meeting Sarah's. "It's uncanny." A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. He knew this trail like the back of his hand. Maybe he knew something else about it too. She pointed to a section of the page. "What's that sketch there?" "It looks like a different way out." Silas leaned in, his eyes narrowing. The sketch was crude but discernible, a winding path diverging sharply from their current route, marked with a small, almost imperceptible X. Below it, a scrawled note: "To bypass the veil, seek the whispering stones." "The veil, he's talking about the mist," Sarah breathed, her excitement growing. "Whispering stones. I've heard old tales about certain rock formations in the deeper woods, said to hum with a strange energy. A shortcut, Silas. Out of this endless fog." Her hand instinctively reached for his arm, her grip light but firm. He found a way. Silas stared at the logbook, a conflict playing out on his face. The rules dictated they stick to known trails, to safety. But this was his grandfather's hand, guiding them from the past. And the mist outside was growing thicker, more oppressive. "It's a risk," he said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "Or a chance," Sarah countered, her eyes sparkling with renewed hope. "A chance to finally get clear." "He wouldn't have written it down if it wasn't real, Silas. Your grandfather knew these woods better than anyone." She squeezed his arm. "What do you say, Ranger Thorne? Are you ready for a little detour?" Silas looked from the ancient logbook to Sarah's eager face. The stoic ranger, bound by duty and caution, felt a stirring of something he hadn't acknowledged in years, a whisper of adventure, a yearning for the unknown. He closed the logbook, a faint smile touching his lips. Let's find these whispering stones. The shared secret. The parchment, brittle with age, felt oddly warm in Silas's gloved hand. He held the logbook open, its cryptic symbols now making a peculiar sense. It says, "Where the roots intertwine and the silent sentinel watches." And then these markings. He traced a finger over what looked like an exaggerated, swirling S followed by an arrow. Sarah leaned closer, her breath a warm feather against his cheek. The roots, that giant oak by the old logging camp? It's practically a landmark for tangled roots. And the silent sentinel? Silas squinted, trying to recall the landscape. The forgotten cairn, Sarah supplied, a glint in her eye. The one with the smooth, gray stone, just past the oak. A low rumble of apprehension stirred in Silas's chest. This wasn't a marked trail, not even a ranger's shortcut. This was something else entirely. "We should be careful," he murmured, his voice betraying a hint of the unease he felt. "These woods, they don't give up their secrets easily." Sarah, however, was already moving, her enthusiasm infectious. "That's the fun of it, isn't it?" She grinned over her shoulder, a playful challenge in her eyes. "Don't tell me the great Silas Thorne is getting cold feet now." He followed, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. The oak was indeed massive, its ancient roots snaking across the forest floor like petrified serpents. Just beyond it, partially hidden by ferns, stood the cairn, its smooth capstone gazing silently into the woods. "The markings," Silas said, examining the logbook again. "It's facing west." He scanned the undergrowth, his gaze falling upon a cluster of gnarled roots that seemed to form a natural archway, almost too perfect. He pushed aside a curtain of ivy. Behind it, a dark opening yawned. A gust of cool, damp air wafted out, carrying the scent of rich earth and wet stone. "A tunnel," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with awe. "Just like the stories." Silas produced a small, powerful headlamp from his pack, its beam cutting through the gloom. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to stoop, and the air grew heavy with the scent of subterranean dampness. Water dripped rhythmically from unseen crevices. Sarah, surprisingly, took the lead, her steps light and sure, occasionally pausing to trace a symbol etched into the tunnel wall with her fingertips. Silas, close behind, kept a watchful eye, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his knife. The darkness pressed in, a palpable entity, but Sarah's quiet murmurs of wonder kept the claustrophobia at bay. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel began to ascend slightly, and the air grew fresher. A faint, ethereal glow appeared ahead. As they rounded a final bend, they found themselves at another ivy-shrouded opening. They emerged onto a familiar stretch of the old mill trail, the mist that had clung to the forest all morning now gracefully dissolving, revealing patches of brilliant blue sky. The world outside felt vibrant, reborn. Silas straightened, adjusting his pack. He looked at Sarah, her face illuminated by the breaking sunlight, a triumphant grin etched upon it. Her eyes, bright with the thrill of discovery, met his. A genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners, spread across Silas's face. The rigid lines of responsibility that usually defined him softened, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that something fundamental had shifted between them in that subterranean passage. The shared secret, the thrill of the unknown, had forged a new path, not just through the earth, but between their two very different souls.